Hello, welcome to the Pittsburgh Views YouTube channel. Seeing as how my last Raptor video was a pretty big success, we're going to continue on with the theme for this week. Hello, Cadence. Why aren't you in bed? Today we're going to install new shocks on a 2013 Raptor in hopes to remedy the clunking noise that comes from the suspension. We have some rebuilt units from Texas Suspension Works, and we're going to go ahead and throw those on a 13 Raptor. This is the same operation for F-150s between 09 and 2019. Enjoy! Here's the truck we'll be working on today, 2013 Ford Raptor owned by my buddy Chris. It has just over 70,000 miles on it, and the ride quality is very harsh, and there's definitely a clunk in the front end over bumps.
Yeah. Let's take a look at what we got from Texas Shock Works. Looks like in the package you get a little note that says you will get your money back as long as you take care of returning these shocks. And there's different levels of condition that they will pay out for. So let's hope the shocks that we take off this truck are the same quality as or condition as these. Some koozie action, you know.
All free advertisement.
Me loves to drink some beers, so I'm good with that. And then you've got some shocks in here. Things.
Here's a look at one of the rebuilt shocks. Basically, when you order them, you kind of guess what condition your shock's in and they try to match it. You can see it has new bushings, and Chris got the optional Schrader valve so we could raise and lower the nitrogen levels. You see it's got the Texas Shock Works sticker right on there, and he also had the shafts polished. Here's the rear shock. Here's the location of the valve on there. Removing the front shock assembly is pretty straightforward. There's three 15mm nuts on the top. There's a 21mm nut here on the upper control arm. There's a 21mm nut here on the outer tie rod. There's a 28mm bolt through the shaft on the bottom of the shock. You have to disconnect the 4x4 vacuum hose and the ABS hose so you don't stretch them. Here's a better look at the 15mm nuts. You see I already have that 21 removed there. And that's a 28mm bolt with a 30mm nut on the other side. Now that we have the shock assembly removed, we're going to head on over to the spring compressor. I don't recommend trying this at home with those C-clamp style compressors you could get from the parts store. It could be very dangerous. If you could take the shocks off yourself, I'd recommend taking them to the shop and have the shocks swapped out. It probably wouldn't cost very much money. So it's a little bit tedious trying to get these springs lined up in the compressor, and this compressor is fairly old. But once you have it in there lined up, they come out pretty easy. Once you have the assembly centered, you can start compressing the spring. It didn't take as much as I thought to compress this spring, and once the spring is compressed, you can grab the bottom of the shock, and if you could wiggle it, then you're ready to take the shock out. You can see here the shock wiggles independently of the spring. Now we're ready to take the nut off the top and remove the shock. Once you have the old shock removed, you have to transfer over the spring perch seat and also the bump stop. Also, there's a dust cap on top of the shock here, which I forgot to transfer over, so don't forget to do that. Then you can slide the shock assembly back up in the spring. Don't ever put your face this close to a loaded spring. Once the shock's back in place and the spring is against the seat, you can install the nut. Usually I let some compression off the spring before I tighten the nut down so the shock doesn't move. The torque spec for this nut is 41 foot-pounds. Now that the shaft nut is tight, we can remove the assembly from the compressor and head back over to the truck. I could not get the shaft to budge on the old shock. Maybe they're stuck.
Could be. Rode like crap.
Yeah. Now that I have the shock reinstalled and I tightened the upper nuts to 30 foot-pounds and the lower bolt to 400 foot-pounds, I'm going to use a pry bar to reinstall the upper ball joint, and I'm going to install that nut and tighten it to 111 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to reinstall the outer tie rod to the knuckle assembly, and I'm going to tighten that nut to 85 foot-pounds. Next, you want to reinstall the 4x4 vacuum lines and ABS line back into the connectors on the spindle. And there you have it. The front shock is installed. Now it's time to move on to the rear. The rear shocks are much easier to remove. There's a 15mm bolt on the top and bottom with an 18mm nut on the back side. You just remove those two bolts and the shock comes out. You can see I have the rear differential supported by a transmission jack, but if you only do one side at a time, this is not necessary.
Let me know if you want me to play catch.
Huh?
Let me know if you want me to play catch.
And just like that, the rear shock is removed. Now we'll install the new one. I found it was easier to put it in the bottom first and then push it into the top.
Alrighty. Teamwork.
Once you have the nuts and bolts reinstalled, you want to torque those down to 66 foot-pounds. Now with all four shocks replaced, we're ready to test them out.
Oh, look at that. It rips. Oh!
Just like new.
You can tell already?
Absolutely.
Really?
Oh yeah.
How big a
It's
difference?
1,000 times better.
Wow,
it really is.
that's
It was
awesome.
it was that bad.
Well, that's money well spent.
It was that bad.
What did you end up paying?
The exchange program is it's about 150 a shock plus a few upgrades, so give or take another 100 and a half for everything. I have to package up the old shocks, send them back, and get my deposit back, and it'll be
Oh,
600-700 out the door.
well, it's a bump
Friend
up here.
prices on install. Best Christmas ever.
Better?
Oh,
Better with the bumps? Out here
I'm ready to do some jumps again. Oh, absolutely.
So money well spent.
Absolutely.
All right, that's what I want to hear.
Absolutely.
So how much would all this cost? To rebuild the 4 shocks, it's $600. To have the shafts polished, it's an additional $50. And to have the Schrader valves installed, it's another $50. Plus the $500 core charge, which Chris will get refunded when they receive his old shocks. The flat rate time to do this job is 4 hours, so roughly another $400 in labor. Your total cost would be right around $1,000. It took me about 2 hours to do this job. Chris was more than pleased with the results. Here's a quick side-by-side comparison of the 13 Raptor next to the 19. The 13 is still an awesome truck, but it's starting to look dated compared to the 19. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this procedure is very similar on all 09 to 2019 Ford F150s. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for checking out my channel. If you haven't subscribed, please do so, and I hope you all have a happy new year.